I was born in Northern Ireland in 1956 and grew up there, a sort of a normal childhood. Um, both my parents were school teachers, so I had a sort of a normal, happy life as a child, I think. Um, I, then Northern Ireland got into this terrible political situation, which happened whenever I was probably a teenager. And for the rest of my time I lived there, one had to deal with all those kinds of troubles. We also used to drink too much to somehow get out of it mentally too, to get away from what was happening. Um, then my mother really suggested I went to art college. I didn't really, I mean, I didn't come from an art family, so it didn't occur to me to be an artist. My mother suggested I would go to art college because I'd always drawn all my life, and she thought maybe I should do that. So anyway, she arranged an interview for me at Liverpool Art College, and I went there and I got accepted, and that was it. And really the first day I was in college, I realised that I was going to be an artist, and I would be that for all of my life. And I think I realised that because it was the first time I'd found really any purpose in life. Everything else seemed to be sort of irrelevant. And growing up in that sort of a fucked up society really made me probably form a different set of priorities about life. And, you know, I saw life destroyed. I saw a society destroyed around me. And it made me think that the normal values that people have, like some kind of make some money or buy a car or buy a house or something, it didn't seem to me to be vital things, because if people were being killed or something like that was happening around you, that would be fundamentally more important. So somehow I think being an artist seemed to sort of fit in with what ideas I was beginning to have about life. And I think maybe I felt that I was somewhat detached from society anyway, and then to be an artist, maybe artists are a bit like that. So really my work has become kind of formed by that, and I think I try to take a critical look at the society and what's happening around me. What I did, what many people did who wanted to not get into that trouble, was I found something else for an interest. I got interested in motorcycles, which I still have until this day. You know, it was the interest that we had, and it took people off the streets physically. It also gave us, some interest other than the politics that were happening around us. My friends were Protestant and Catholic, which would be a rare thing in Northern Ireland. But all we cared about were riding motorcycles, so it seemed to work. Something that became a big interest of mine was the Vietnam War with America. So I went there. Well, I went there a long time ago, in 1992, but I went back there to do some work for the first time in I think 2001. And since then, I've worked in Vietnam a lot, almost every year, maybe twice a year, and Southeast Asia and Asia in general. And mostly doing research for work that I would make back in New York, or sometimes to make art there. Um, and I worked for Ford Foundation for a while there. I would work with young artists and stuff to do projects with them there, or maybe bring them to America or things like that. I don't do that anymore, and I haven't been there for a couple of years. One of the, well, a couple of the projects I could think of that come out of my association with Vietnam. One of them is called Queen Bee. It's based on a true story that a friend of mine told me, Miss Mai, and it's about what happened the day the war ended in Vietnam. And I was curious about that because I was thinking, what would it be like if all the society around you, all the values, all the laws, everything which you hold today suddenly changed tomorrow?
You've got mail.
So she told me her story about the day the war ended in Saigon, and her family were big communists in Hanoi. And of course, whenever the war ended, these top guys came to South Vietnam to take over the running of the country. Her father was one of these guys, and the rule of thumb apparently at the time was they had to find a place to live, was you would find an empty building. So the place that her family found was an empty prostitute bar on Dom Coy Street called Papillon Bar, and that became their home, which it still is to this day. But she told me that she was a little girl at the time, and she remembers entering this bar, and for example, the neon light was still lit. The flashing lights that they have in these kinds of bars were still flashing. There was cigarette butts in the ashtray, and there was still empty beer bottles and stuff sitting about the room, and that ghostly atmosphere, it just felt that they'd walked out the back door, she'd walked in the front door. And it had a real strong impression on her. Whenever she told me the story, it sounded wonderful to me too. And I began to think then, how could I make art about this? So what I came up with was that I would really make the bar. So the show that I made after that was I would turn a space into a bar like this, pretty authentically. It would look like my vision of such a place. I would have beautiful Vietnamese girls to serve Vietnamese alcohol in the bar, and Vietnamese food, and we'd have entertainers, and it would be like a real bar. And we would have it open maybe, for example, on a Thursday night every week. Kind of like the opening for an exhibition. And people would come and hang out and get drunk and have fun in my bar. And then after that, we would have it empty of people for the rest of the week, and people could come and visit the installation, and but we'd leave all the crap behind us. So I did that around the world, in different cities and stuff, and the kind of comment that I'm making there is, like America goes to do these wars in other countries, and then if they've had enough, they come home, but they leave their crap behind them, and the locals have to clean it up. For example, in the case of South Vietnam, I mean, they stayed there until they'd had enough, and they went home, and whenever they went home, they were home, but the South Vietnamese who they worked with then got fucked over by the communists, and the Americans left them to do that. So that was that piece. Another piece that I was thinking of today that I did, well, that I started, I didn't finish, was in Vietnam, especially in North Vietnam, they have, like a village there'd maybe be one job everybody in the village does. So one village that I had in mind was a place where they do wood carving, and probably they would mostly carve Buddhas for the temple, for the pagoda. So my idea was that I could get this village. I don't know how many people live in the village, but let's say there's 100 people in the village anyway. So if I could get the 100 people to carve life-size self-portraits of themselves, then I would have 100 of these life-size figures, and I would bring them to America, and then it would be like I would be bringing these people, the whole village, to America. And this kind of belief that, even if the body stays there, that the soul could go somewhere else. So in some way, I could be bringing these people to America. I started it and got a few of these figures made, and they looked wonderful, but I just couldn't in the end afford to continue with it, and the project kind of got forgotten about or sidelined. Maybe someday, if I win the lottery and become rich, I'll go back and finish it off.
Hey, Rodney.
Hey, Dave. How are you? Hey, Lolly-san.
Hey, Lolly-san.
What's going on?
How are you?
Good.
You're just in time for coffee.
Some of your good coffee.
Yeah.
Keep warm. Yeah, we've been working on some. We've been working a little bit. Let's see what we can do. Do you want to do my sword?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, here it is. Start.
We are high team boogie. Yeah. What I'm doing at the moment is I'm working on a project called Fucked Up, which references the fucked up world that we live in right now. Kind of, as anybody knows, world economies in chaos, and sort of a lot of wars raging around the world, and it seems that everything is kind of not quite right at the moment. So I'm working on this project, which I'm trying to do around the world in different cities, where I would go and create chaos. The kind of way that I am doing that is by getting different things to happen in the one space at the one time. I could give as an example, let's say 2 bands playing in the same room, or 2 or 3 bands or whatever, so that the music becomes just a noise and kind of fights with each other, also visually and everything else. So I might have maybe 10 or more things happening in the room at one time, and to create chaos. So I did it in New York, and I did it in Beijing, and every time I do it, it's different, because it's different depending on the culture of the place I go to. For example, in New York, I live here, so I think I know what goes on here to some degree. So I can put it together in New York, and I sort of have a fairly good idea of what would happen. In China, I had very much less control anyway over what would happen. So I'm open to that. It's chaos, so it's chaos for me too, if I don't know really what's going to happen. So I set up a situation where things will happen, and then I'm sort of happy enough to see what they would be. The paintings that I'm working on at the moment relate to my Fucked Up project, and I'm trying to create chaos in the painting also. I paint in a kind of a chaotic way. I sort of always have. I mean, I don't know what most people do, but I think painters often they use a palette. I never really used one. I would use the floor, or just put the paint on the canvas and mix it like that. I'm buying the colours that I sort of want to use. So I kind of have an idea what the painting might look like in the end, but I'm just squeezing the paint onto the canvas, and I guess there's a sort of a controlled chaos, or sort of a controlled accident, because I think I have some idea how it'll look in the end, but it's a lot. There's a lot left to chance, or at least a lot left to decisions to be made on the spur of the moment while I'm working at them. I use the paint directly from the tube, so it's in a paste form. So I use the paint in this paste kind of form, because if I put it somewhere, it stays there, and if I put another color over it, it stays there too. They don't run in together and just become some kind of a brown or something. So it gives me the ability to work very quickly, and whenever I work, I'm working as quickly as I can. I mean, it always kind of drives me crazy because there's a limit. I mean, I can't work as quickly as I want to, but I want to be able to, if I could just do it by magic, to change it constantly all the time until I get to a point where I like it. So I build up these layers of paint over and over another, and things show through, and it gets some depth and stuff, and hopefully in the end, hopefully in the end, it looks like something half decent too. There's other reasons for, like, there's other conceptual reasons for my layering of paint too, apart from the practical uh, ways of working at it. Other reasons such as I can think of censorship and during war, like political censorship. So maybe you might do a painting or write something or whatever, and the powers that be don't allow you to do that. So they stroke it out, paint over it, or edit your, if you're a journalist, edit your work or something. I'm thinking of in Vietnam, for example, if an artist has an exhibition, they have to get permission from the police. The police look at your work and have to approve it. But sometimes I've heard stories of the police coming to your exhibition opening and sticking bits of paper over bits of your art that they don't like. And I thought that was really funny. It happened to a friend of mine. I thought that was really funny. And also really annoying. I mean, I've not been in that situation. But I mean, if you were in that kind of place and there's nothing you could do about it, what can you do? So there's also those reasons for, layering things. I'm also thinking about in Northern Ireland, they have these famous political murals, which people are now painting out because there's supposedly some kind of peace happening there. So again, it's this kind of thing of time passing by, and what might have been relevant 10 years ago becomes irrelevant today. So a big problem, like a big political problem, like at the moment, people know who Al-Qaeda are and they think about Al-Qaeda. 12 years ago, nobody knew who the fuck they were. And I'm kind of thinking, well, what about they didn't do that and they just wait 10 years? Because in 10 years, it's not a problem anymore anyway. And we wouldn't need to have killed each other meanwhile. But it doesn't seem to be the way of the world. I used to think of my art as being anti-war. I now kind of don't use that phrase anymore because it seems that to talk about anti-war is unrealistic because there'll always be wars. So maybe my work's not anti-war. It's just about war, something like that. for today anyway.